Can you hear me? Okay, turn it down so they can go back to sleep after lunch. No, I'm just joking. Look at the faces. Amazing. You remind me of my favorite cocktail bar joke. So this horse walks into a cocktail bar, goes up to the bar, the barman looks at him, and the barman says, "So why the long face?" Come on, cheer up. It's after lunch. It's Friday. We can have a great time. I promise to keep you awake. And by the way, if anyone wants to go to sleep in this session, which is only going to be about 35, 40 minutes, please do so. I'm used to being ignored. I've been married for 40 years. So, I do have to admit with 3 different wives, but but the same principle applies, you know. Yeah. Anyway, they only just gave me the title right now and said, "Go on, go speak about that." Okay, whatever. I tend to, in my presentations, and by the way, I just saw this title on one of the biggest speakers sites in the world, which I'm on, and somebody made a comment about one of my lectures, and they said it was a triumph of presentation over content. I said, okay, fine, I'm happy with that, because if the presentation is fine, people can get whatever they want out of the content. Anyway, as you can tell from my accent, I'm Swiss. No, really, I am Swiss. But I was educated in the UK. They called it education. I called it ritual humiliation and beating. But it was very character forming. So I'm Swiss. And I made a presentation 2 weeks ago in the State Department in Washington. And they were all, of course, Americans, and the secretary was there, the whole thing. And I said, my presentation today will be in English. Real English. And they all sat there, the Americans, going, what does he mean? I was going to add all sorts of stuff about ideology and what I call bullshit politics, but I really didn't. Right. I make loads of predictions when I make a speech. And here are my first 3 predictions. The only 3 things that follow now are absolutely certain. Death, taxation, and politics. That's it. However, death is about one thing which is really integral to what I'm going to talk about. You know, it says I'm going to talk about the digital world in the future. Demographics are going to be absolutely the biggest thing that affects our society, the way we think, economy, in the next 100 years. The world is changing in a fundamental way that it's never changed before. And it's all to do with how you're aging, what young people are doing, what older people are doing, and how that interacts and intersects with economy and the new digital world of economy. As the great economist said, that was Galbraith, the only purpose of predictive economics or forecasting is to make astrology look good. So even he did not believe that we could forecast economically and practically what was happening in the real world. Anyway, many people say about my predictions, they're a bit vague. There's a reason for that. I'd rather be imprecisely kind of right than exactly wrong. So whatever I'm going to say, you know, just take it in a kind of boundary like this. I'd just very quickly like to mention, it's one of my favorite topics about predictions, the world's greatest previous predictions. And in fact, I'll choose a year, 1962. The following predictions were made by Nobel scientists, leaders of corporations, and governmental heads. And I'll just run you through, and then you can kind of judge my predictions against what they said and their success. First of all, the dinner pill will be invented, and everyone will have a dinner pill by 1970. the only organization that ever invented a dinner pill was NASA. And they tried it on the Apollo 13 cruise, which resulted in the Apollo 13 cruise going, we ditch these, and we're going to take a secret McDonald's into orbit. And actually, they did that. So the dinner pill didn't work. The flying car, finally, it didn't get here by 1992, but recently there's been some ideas about flying cars. Which idiot could think there could be flying cars? What are you going to do about traffic control, air traffic control? I mean, you've seen what idiots can do in Germany on the Autobahn. Imagine you put them in the air, and it's kind of scary. The Rand Corporation forecast in 1962 that by 1978, every household in the world would have a monkey worker. A monkey that was trained to do household things. Well, that never worked. Well, no, actually, today, every household does have a monkey worker. It's called a husband. Yeah, so no, that came true. Things like the Dream Cafe came true, virtual reality. Things like the Hyperscaper came true, which is the 1 mile high building. Things like the machine singularity didn't really get there yet. And the prediction in 1962 that by 1987, the United Nations would have a robotic representative on machine rights. That didn't quite work anyway, so forget it. So, borders and economies in the digital world. I'm sorry to go back to 101 as if this is your first year, first day at Leiden University and you're studying economics, okay? Let me remind you what a border is and what economics is, because that really helps us frame what's going to come in terms of the future of the digital economy. So a border is really simple. A line separating two countries. How hard is that? It's not. Or the edge or a boundary of something, and this is important for the digital economy. Does the digital economy have boundaries or borders? And that's a really important issue for the future of the digital economy. Oh, and you all know what an economy is, right? I love at this point, even though they're telling me I've only got 16 minutes, ridiculous. I love going into the audience and sitting next to someone and asking them, what is economy? So, economy apparently is the production and consumption of goods and services and the supply of money. Dead simple, right? The root of this, milate elinika, anybody here? Anybody speak Greek? The root of the word is oikos. Okay, so there's one lady over there that speaks Greek. And that means, oikos means the household or the entity, and it means to manage the household or the entity. So let me just read this. The household is the economy, and the government needs to manage this, mainly through the generation of income, taxes, so they can afford to develop the country or oikos. It's dead simple, right? Commercial organizations generate revenues, stimulate growth, employ more people, and pay more tax. Government reaps the tax, attempts to stimulate the economy and create more jobs, resulting in more tax. And this is the primary focus of governmental interventions in the digital world. What do they want out of it? They want income. It's as simple as that. And the future of the digital economy will be driven by what governments, huge international corporations, and interested parties design or want. Right. Do you know you know what they do to you? They try to condition you like an ape here. They put this thing and they do a countdown, and there's a green line, and then it goes red. Why don't you all come down here, and I'll go sit up there, and whatever. So, we've got a huge number of issues in the digital economy, and all I want to try to tell you today is one or two of those issues, and secondly, the implications on the future of work and jobs and how you're all going to survive in the future digital economy. Look, to tell you the truth, I'm not a digital engineer, scientist. I'm a work guy. I'm a world of work guy, psychologist, psychiatrist, engineer, then ran the world's biggest organization by headcount in the world with 18 million employees a year. I'm much more interested not in the scientific detail of the digital world or the size of the economy. What I'm really interested in is how we all survive in that world in the future, given that the way that society is structured today, our job is to survive economically. What do we all want? We all want to have a meaningful, productive job that gives us some income, and increasingly, that potential is in the digital world, which could be good or could be bad. So in the digital world, we've got a huge number of issues. Stuff like digitally induced terrorism, accentuated fundamentalism, control over the individual, the abuse of the individual. That all comes with working in the digital world. So what are the new borders or boundaries that are coming into this world? What are the entities beyond countries that have a say? How do we organize taxation, regulation, and governance? And how do we thrive as people that just want to do one thing? And the one thing is, how do we make a living? And how do we ensure that our children and their children survive in an economy that within the next 20 years, globally, is going to be 70%, or so they say, in the digital world? How do we do that? And what are the skills that we need to survive in that? So, loads of implications. I'm not going to tell you them, because I've only got 13 minutes left. Here are the critical issues in the digital world for us, every individual. Number one, the cat is out of the bag. Have you heard of that phrase? You know, when the cat gets out of the bag, a load of, begins with S and ends in T and has 4 letters, happens. The original theory, when the World Wide Web was invented, was that it would become self-governing. That has failed. Governments have found out they can't control the digital world. Corporations have found they can't control the digital world. We don't have a global digital ecosystem, governance system. We don't have a global digital police. Regulatory authorities in many geographies are trying to develop and control mechanisms to control the internet, the web, digital economy. But it's not working. Let me just mention a few debacles. The Great Firewall of China. How do you think that worked? It doesn't. I'm an advisor to the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology in Beijing, and their primary job today is to try to work out how to control the internet and internet economy, and they're failing. WikiLeaks, Mr. Trump's apparent invasion by someone outside of the country in the election campaign. The dark web. By the way, the dark web doesn't work anymore. The dark web has been attacked by a number of searchlights, and anybody can do anything on the dark web today. You know, the blockchain technology, the financial structure of the digital economy with Bitcoin, everything else based on blockchain technology, it's all transparent. I promise you. And let me tell you something that one of my companies can do. Any corporation in the world can send a note to my Bangalore-based team about an individual. And it says, tell us all about this individual, tell me about their financial status, tell me about their career history, tell me where they've lied, tell me whether they've actually done all of this stuff. And in 2 hours, we can give IBM a report back that says, here on the dependability scale is exactly where this person is. None of you have an identity today on the internet that we cannot interrogate and find out exactly what you have done or what you might do in future. That's kind of scary. How can we do that now when we couldn't do it 5 years ago? The answer is simply big data. We can, I'll give you an example. Got a company again in Bangalore that takes 50 million data sets from Walmart North America every night, and each data set has around about 200,000 bits of data in it, so 50 million times 200,000 bits of data, and by the next morning, we tell every shop assistant in Walmart in North America where to place their products, what the price point should be for the whole day, what the demographic is of the people that are coming in at different times of the day, and how to sell product to them, and the likelihood of the financial services they would require. That's kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, it's scary. However, Walmart love it because they say it's improved their shop floor productivity by 200% in 2 years, but whatever. So the issue is, if we think we can be private in the digital world, we're not, and we're wrong. So where are we? In the US, Accenture says the digital economy is 6 trillion. It's probably double that. It's supposedly 7% of the European economy and 20% of what we call global value delivery around the world. So 20%, essentially, you can say, of the global economy is digital, which is absolutely huge. That's increasing at 5% a year and should reach a market share plateau in about 10 years, which means that's as much penetration of the global economy that digital can get. But then it still keeps on growing with the rest of the global economy. The digital economy is there, but nobody is quite sure how to develop it from a global systems and functionality point of view. I'm going to do 2 quick things, the global megatrends that are affecting this, and then tell you the top future skills that you need to make sure you have and competencies your kids must have to succeed in the global economy. Megatrends, extreme longevity, really easy. Secondly, the rise of smart machines and systems, the computational world where massive increases in sensors and processing power make the world a potentially programmable system. That's kind of scary. New media ecology. We need to be better at stuff. I mean, one of my kids is a development director in an augmented reality company in London. I mean, what is that? Who do you sell that to? And he says, oh, it's easy. Shell come to us. They're doing a big exhibition in 2 weeks, and they want the customer not to look at a design flow of a new refinery. They want them to walk through it. And, you know, we can do that on screens or with headsets, the whole thing. We've got to get used to a completely new interface with the digital world. We're facing a totally connected world digitally, and future digital economic growth, we need to ensure that people have got the right competencies to thrive there. So I've got loads of issues about security, personal identity, economy, etc., in the virtual world, but whatever happens in the virtual world, we're going to need certain accentuated skills to make sure we survive in that world. So we had a 10-year project with MIT, Stanford, a couple of world-renowned Nobel scientists to say, what are the skills and competencies that people need in the next 20 years? And I'm going to tell you what they are. So don't worry. I'll now repeat the great lie of every presenter. I promise to finish on time. I promise to give you my presentation, and I promise to give you time for question and answers. They're all lies, by the way. Well, why would you give people that are really smarter than you time to ask questions? It'll just make you look an idiot. But you will get copies of the presentation, and I kind of almost admit that I will finish on time. So, you don't have to. Here are the top competencies that we need, and we've researched this worldwide, every culture, that your kids or you will need to thrive in a digital world. The number one, everybody goes, duh. Okay, let's see if you all go, duh. Oh, if you think it's please all go, duh, after this one. Number one competency, making sense. There are high-level thinking skills that can't be codified. These are skills that help us to create unique insights critical to decision making. As the great scientist and philosopher Lanier said, if we ask what thinking is, so then ask how do we foster it, we encounter an astonishing and terrifying answer. We don't know. Sense-making is the ability to determine the deeper meaning or significance of what is being expressed in any context. Number one competency for the next 20 years. Number two, you can do a duh anytime you want on these. Social intelligence, the ability to connect to others in a deep and direct and meaningful way. 3, novel and adaptive thinking, proficiency at thinking and coming up with solutions that are beyond those solutions that are rote-based. I call it rogue thinking. We need that in every individual. Novel and adaptive thinking is probably one of the top competencies. Next one, this is a definite duh, cross-cultural competency. The ability to operate and thrive in multiple cultural settings. 5, now it gets complicated. The ability in the human brain to develop computational thinking. How do we do that? The ability to translate vast amounts of data into abstract concepts and to understand data-based reasoning. There's a huge number of schools out there that are trying to get young people to shift from the reasoning constructs and logic that we have to database thinking, which is very, very different. The next one, I was talking with a great filmmaker guy last night, new media literacy. You know, so one of my sons does augmented reality stuff. People don't get that until you put the headset on them and show them. There are around about 50 new media forms that we do not use every day. We've got to get used to that. Next one, transdisciplinarity. I love trying that one after lunch. Especially, it's fine if you haven't had wine, but transdisciplinarity is quite difficult. Literacy in and ability to understand concepts across multiple disciplines, easy. A design mindset, which really is a conjunction of computational thinking and new media literacy. Cognitive load management. You know what that is? Do you know that today, every one of you gets a multiple of 30 of the information that you get into your brain than you got 10 years ago? And your brain can't handle it. We need to work out how to handle data overload and to be able to go, this data is important, this data isn't, and you can't do that as a thinking process. You've got to condition yourself to do it. Really interesting. Last one is virtual collaboration. Obvious. How do you survive? How do you collaborate in a digital economy? So, we have the following global drivers: demographics, evolving education systems, equity and inclusion, globalization, digital technology, climate change, and the green economy. It's easy. If we can just work with all of that stuff, I almost said a different word, but if we can work with all of that, we can get all of this right. So, all I tried to do, because I know there's people that are digital experts out there, work experts, parents, kids, the whole thing is to say, the digital economy is going to fundamentally impact what we do, how we earn a living, and how we change a world in the future. The important thing is to think about how we train, develop, and educate people to include all of those things. Because if you go to any university, any school, anywhere in the world, they don't help you train in this stuff. They just don't. Nobody does it. So, one bit of good news, in a partnership with IBM, we just introduced to 200 African universities a curriculum that offers students outside of their core subject training, development, and learning in every one of those competency areas. That's the future. And we've got to do that with every educational establishment. I want to make sure that I come back to Leiden and go to the university and say, hello, are you teaching this stuff? And if the answer is no, they'd better be teaching it. So the future is different kinds of learning, different kinds of involvement, being able to work out a way that we can survive in the digital global economy. And the digital global economy is really fast growing. It's really everywhere, which is why I didn't give you a detailed forensic analytic of how much each part of it is growing. It is growing, it's growing fast, but to survive in it, we need to do this. Have you ever asked your kids, or have you ever asked your parents, if 70% becomes digital economy, how do I survive in the gig economy? Essentially, I'm an individual contractor. What does the company mean? What do I mean? How do I relate to virtual work? We need to answer all of those questions, and we've got a whole bunch of big corporations that we're working with to try to answer those questions. So, I proffered more questions than answers, which is deliberately what I do, because you don't come here to listen to a lecture. You come here to think about new questions and new answers. The digital world provides an amazing opportunity for us, but we've got to work out what our interface with that digital world is. And we need to work out the skills people need, now kids need, to get into that world. Whenever I finish a speech of any kind, I tell people what the world is really like. I've got a huge commitment to refugee causes worldwide, stopping human trafficking, and stopping the abuse of migrant workers. And that reflects the fact that the world isn't right, and we need to take part in a world that is right. I'll say a couple of very, very short last things that will remind you of where you are and where I am in the world. Don't imagine that the world is billions of people. Imagine the world is only 100 people. And I'll tell you what the world looks like very quickly. There are 57 Asians, 21 Europeans, 14 Americans, and 8 Africans. There are 52 women and 48 men. There are 30 Caucasians and 70 non-Caucasians. There are 30 Christians and 70 non-Christians. There are 89 heterosexuals and 11 homosexuals. 6 people own almost 70% of the wealth of the world. 5 of them are American and 1 is South American. 80 live in poverty. 70 are illiterate. 50 have malnutrition. 1 is dying and 1 is being born. 1.5, don't know how you get 1.5 people, but 1.5 have a computer. 1 has a degree, but 82 have a cell phone. In everything you do, please remember this. 1 million people die a week. 65,000 people a day are trafficked into slavery or forced labor. 500 million people, 500 million, are being persecuted or are in prison or are being tortured. Whatever we do, remember that. Thank you.
Thank you.